Aven's POV. The morning started with me fretting over my 8-month-long boyfriend, Ian's proud hickey that he left last night on my neck with zero sense of thought. How the hell I'm gonna hide it next morning? I pressed the cold spoon firmly on the hickey, mentally groaning at Ian for being passionate last night. Do you have any idea how hard this is gonna be to cover up? I groaned, pulling the collar of my t-shirt up to my chin as I flipped pancakes. Ian yawned, stretching like a cat behind me. It's not that bad. It looks like I got attacked by a vacuum cleaner. He smirked and came up behind me, looping his arms around my waist. Then maybe don't moan my name so loud next time. I elbowed him lightly, trying to hold back a laugh. You're an idiot. Yeah, he murmured against my ear. But I'm your idiot. I melted for a second, leaning into his warmth. That was the problem with Ian. One word, one grin, and I forgot how to breathe. Then my phone rang. Dad. I froze, spatula halfway in the air. Ian peeked over my shoulder, eyebrows raised. Your dad again? He asked. Didn't he visit last semester? Yeah, I said, my pulse already racing. For one day. Thought that was the end of it. I hit answer and tried to sound casual. Hey Dad, everything okay? Better be, came that familiar, no-nonsense voice. I'm visiting you, just a few days. Got some time off? And I need to check your living situation personally. Heard some complaints from the neighbors about noise and other nonsense. Can't have my son being careless. My brain short-circuited. This week? As in tomorrow morning. I stared blankly at the wall. Ian mouthed, You're kidding. And I shook my head in panic. Dad kept talking. You've been keeping the place decent, right? Yeah, I managed. Totally. Good. And that roommate of yours, Torres, right? The one from engineering? Ian perked up at the mention of his name, grinning proudly. Yeah, that's him, I said carefully. He, still around. Good, Dad replied. At least one of you's got some direction. Before I could respond, he hung up. Ian whistled low. Well, that's comforting. I dropped my phone on the counter. He still thinks I am straight, by the way. So maybe don't look at me like you're undressing me in your head this week. No promises? Ian teased, biting into his pancake. Next morning, I stood by the window, watching Dad's truck pull up. My hands were sweating. Ian tried to calm me down by straightening the throw pillows, like that'd help. When Dad stepped out, he was exactly the same. Perfect posture, crisp shirt, eyes that could kill a man at 20 paces. Sir Hayes has landed, Ian whispered. Don't joke, I muttered. He'll smell the act we are pulling. Dad walked in, suitcase in hand, scanning the apartment like it was a military inspection. You've kept the place decent, he said. Proud of you for that. Thanks, Dad. Ian came forward with his usual charm. Good to see you again, sir. Dad gave a firm nod, expression unreadable. Torres, hope you're a good influence on my son. Yes, sir. Dad's eyes flicked between us, and I swear I stopped breathing. Good. That's what I expected to hear. Ian smiled politely, though I caught the twitch in his jaw. Trying my best, sir. Dad grunted, setting his suitcase down. So which room's mine? I blinked. Mine? He raised an eyebrow. You think I'm sleeping on that flimsy couch? I'll take your room. You crash with me and Ian can, manage on the couch. Dad, that's not... End of discussion. Ian bit back a grin. Guess I'm the lucky one who gets the couch then. At night, the apartment was dark, the only sound my dad's snoring, loud enough to rattle the ceiling. I lay on the other side of the bed with Dad, wide awake, listening to it. The air was thick with the smell of his aftershave and the weight of every rule I'd ever broken. Through the crack of the half-open door, I could see Ian sprawled on the couch. Shirtless, of course. A smug grin spread across his face when he caught me looking. My phone buzzed with a message. Ian, you miss me yet? Aven, you're insane. Go to sleep. Ian. Can't sleep without you. Sneak out. Aven. My dad's literally snoring next to me. Ian. Then be quiet. I stared at the screen, shaking my head. He was impossible. And still, I found myself slipping out of bed 10 minutes later. Barefoot. Careful. My heart is hammering like a drum. Ian was waiting on the couch, arms open like this was the most normal thing in the world. You're gonna get us killed, I whispered. Then at least we'll die cuddling, he whispered back, tugging me down beside him. You're such an idiot. Yeah, but I'm your idiot, he said again, voice low and warm. I rolled my eyes but didn't pull away. The second his arm wrapped around me, everything inside me went quiet. Just the rhythm of his breathing, the faint hum of the streetlight outside, and the muffled sound of Dad's snores down the hall. We didn't kiss, didn't even move much, just held on to each other like it was the only thing keeping us alive. Every time the floor creaked, I flinched. Ian just squeezed my hand. Relax, he murmured. He's out cold. Yeah, well, if he wakes up and finds me out here, he won't, Ian said softly. And even if he does, we'll deal with it. Together. That word, together, hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I stayed like that until the first hint of dawn brushed the window. Then I slipped back into the room, heart still racing. Dad was still snoring. Barely made it. But as I lay back down, trying to steady my breathing, one thought burned in my chest. If he ever found out about Ian, it wouldn't just be a fight. It'd be war. 4 days. In my morning nowadays starts with pretending Ian and I were just roommates, and ends with shooting Ian a warning glare from across the hall for flirting with me around Dad's hawk sense. The man was a menace. My dad's watchful gaze never seemed to leave us, and Ian, of course, wasn't making it easier. Every smirk, every little brush of his hand when no one was looking, felt like he was daring me to slip up. Day 2. The smell of burnt eggs filled the kitchen. Dad was standing by the stove, spatula in hand, looking like he was commanding a platoon instead of frying breakfast. Ian, being the overachiever he was, swooped in with his good boy roommate act. Morning, sir, he said cheerfully, taking over the pan before Dad could ruin it completely. Dad raised a brow. You cook every day, Torres? Ian shrugged. Only when I'm trying to impress someone. I choked on my coffee. Of course, he said that. Dad didn't notice, thank God, but my glare could have killed Ian on the spot. Ian just shot me a smug grin over his shoulder, mouthing, You're welcome. I muttered under my breath, You're gonna get me executed. Dad glanced up. You say something, son? I straightened immediately. Nope, just love your eggs, Dad. Ian snorted. I kicked his shin under the table. He didn't even flinch. Day 3. By the third day, Dad had decided we were out of milk, fruit, and apparently morality, because he'd been lecturing me all morning about discipline and focus. At the grocery store, I pushed the cart while Dad disappeared down another aisle. Ian leaned close, voice low. Bet your dad doesn't know you like the flavor of chocolate when it's on the condo. I nearly ran the cart into a display of cereal boxes. Shut the hell up, I hissed. He grinned. Relax, soldier. The word hit like a slap. My stomach tightened. Don't call me that, I muttered. His expression softened immediately. Hey, sorry, I didn't mean... Just don't, I said, gripping the cart handle until my knuckles turned white. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Dad's voice boomed from the next aisle. Aven, which of these is better, chocolate or strawberry smoothie? Ian leaned back, whispering near my ear. I'm guessing vanilla would do for now, since cuddling on the couch could only give us that. I bit back a laugh, shaking my head. You're the worst. Yeah, he said quietly. But I make you smile. Damn him, he was right. Day 4. Dad insisted we have a family movie night, which, in his mind, meant a war documentary about submarines. But much to his obliviousness, Ian played a BL romantic movie. By the 30-minute mark, he was out cold in the recliner, snoring like distant thunder. Ian sat next to me on the couch, the glow from the TV flickering across his face. Our shoulders brushed, his fingers trailing behind my spine. "Stop it," I whispered. He glanced at me, all fake innocence. "Stop what?" "Being obvious." He shifted slightly closer, his fingers brushing my thighs under the blanket. "I'm not doing anything." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Dad could hear it through his dreams. "You're doing everything," I whispered back. Ian's lips twitched. "Then move away." I didn't. The tension stretched between us until Dad suddenly snorted awake, sitting up. "Good movie," he muttered, blinking at the screen. "What was the ending, by the way?" "Both men confessed their feelings and had a happily ever after," Ian replied instead. "You say, men?" My dad's jaw clenches, and my breath catches upon finding the same reaction I fear seeing in him. Bullshit movie. What kind of message are these movies even giving? Aven, I forbid you to ever watch this kind of genre. You get me? Ian cocked his eyebrow at me, disbelief at my dad's thinking, while I sat there in conflict, torn between being an obedient son to my dad and my love for Ian. Later that night, the second Dad went to bed, I stormed into the kitchen, slamming a plate into the sink. Ian followed, looking way too relaxed. "You okay?" "No," I snapped. "You need to stop making me stand in the tight spot, Ian." "What?" "You made Dad watch a movie on gay romance and had the nerve to flirt with me in front of my dad, talking about same-gender love. You think my dad won't sniff the lie we are feeding him?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Aven, how long are you planning to hide us from your dad?" "Hide?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Ian, once my dad finds out, he'll drag me home and that'll be it. No school, no apartment, no us." Ian's voice softened. "You really think he'd—" "You don't know him," I cut in. My throat felt tight. "You don't know what it's like to hide every single thing that makes you happy just so someone doesn't hate you for it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think I don't get it?" I stared at him, words dying on my tongue. "I wait every night just to hold you for 5 minutes," he said, jaw tense. "That's all I get. 5 minutes of you before you have to sneak back like I'm some dirty secret." My chest ached. "You're not a secret. Then why does it feel like I am?" We stood there, inches apart, both breathing too hard, both too stubborn to move first. "I can't lose you," I said quietly. "Then stop pushing me away," he said back, just as soft. The silence that followed was heavier than yelling. He sighed, stepping back. "Good night, Aven." I didn't answer. That night, I didn't sneak out. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to my dad's even breathing beside me. Every creak in the apartment made my heart skip, half hoping, half dreading that it was Ian. But it wasn't. Out in the living room, I knew exactly how he looked. Curled up on the couch, staring at the door, waiting. He wouldn't knock. He wouldn't text. Not this time. He'd made his point, and I hated that it hurt this much. I turned over, pressing my face into the pillow, whispering into the dark. Just a few more days. But it didn't feel like a promise anymore. It felt like an apology. By dawn, I'd stopped pretending to sleep. The silence between Ian and me was heavier than my dad's snoring. Every breath felt too loud. I slipped out of bed and padded toward the living room. The glow from the muted TV flickered across Ian's face. He was awake, hoodie half-zipped, scrolling on his phone like he hadn't just broken my heart 12 hours ago. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He didn't look up right away. "For what?" "For making this harder than it should be." He sighed, the kind that sounded like it came from somewhere deep. "You can make it up to me." I frowned. "How?" He set his phone down, switched off the TV, and his eyes finally met mine. "Start by getting over here." I hesitated, then sat beside him. The space between us didn't last long. His fingers brushed my knee, light and hesitant, then firmer when I didn't pull away. "Still mad?" I whispered. He shook his head. "Just tired of pretending I don't want you." That did something to me, something reckless. I leaned in before my brain could argue, my lips brushing his in a kiss that was soft and unsteady. But then he kissed back, slow at first, then deeper, hungrier, like all the words we couldn't say had been waiting for this moment. His hand slid under the hem of my shirt, fingertips skimming my skin. I shivered. "Ian," I breathed, half warning, half plea. He pulled back slightly, eyes dark. "You don't want this?" I glanced toward the hallway. But my dad." A loud, rumbling snore echoed from the bedroom. Ian smirked. "See? Out cold." I couldn't help it. I laughed, quiet but breathless, and pulled him back in. His hoodie came off. My shirt followed. For a few stolen minutes, it was just us. Warm skin, muffled giggles, heartbeats too loud. Then, footsteps. Everything froze. The hallway light flicked on, and my father stood there. "Jesus Christ!" he barked, voice slicing through the air. "What the hell is this?" I stumbled off Ian, heart in my throat. "Dad, it's not... It's exactly what it looks like." His face was crimson, jaw tight, eyes burning with disgust. "Sir," Ian started. "Please, don't speak to me," Dad snapped, pointing a shaking hand. "You, pack your bags, we're leaving." "Dad, please," I begged. "Just let me explain." He cut me off, voice rising. "Explain what? You've been lying to me all this time? You think I raised you for this?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "For what? Being happy?" "Enough," he barked, slamming his hand on the table. "You're done with school. I'll talk to the dean tomorrow and cancel your admission." "What?" My chest went tight. "You can't." "I can. You'll come work at the garage. At least then you'll learn something useful." I shook my head. "No, I'm not quitting school. I'm not hiding who I am anymore." He stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "Then maybe I should call your boyfriend's scholarship board. See how long his fancy engineering dream lasts when they find out what kind of roommate he's been keeping." Ian froze beside me. "Sir, please don't. That scholarship." "Shut up," Dad roared. My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. My father didn't bluff. "Dad, don't drag him into this," I said, voice trembling. "This is about me." "No," he said coldly. "You made it about him." We stood there, 3 people and 1,000 broken things between us. Finally, he turned for the hallway, muttering, "We leave in an hour." The door slammed behind him. The silence that followed felt like smoke choking the room. Ian reached for me, voice barely a whisper. "Ave!" I shook my head, tears stinging. "He saw everything. He's never gonna forgive me for this." Ian's voice broke. "Then I'll find a way. I swear." An hour later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of Dad's truck. The roads were empty, streetlights flickering across the windshield. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. He gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. The faint smell of motor oil clung to his jacket, the same one I'd worn as a kid when he used to teach me how to drive. I'd thought back then he was unshakable, invincible. Now, I just saw a man who couldn't stand the sun sitting beside him. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. Outside, the horizon was turning pink. I replayed Ian's words in my head, "I'll find a way." And as the truck rolled past the city limits, my throat tightened. Because for the first time that morning, I realized how much I wanted to believe him. 3 weeks. In it had been a week since Dad dragged me home, and the house felt like a museum, quiet, cold, and full of rules. The sound of my boots on the garage floor was the only thing breaking the silence most days. I stayed in the bedroom I'd grown up in, surrounded by the familiar walls I'd never really known as mine. There, on the nightstand, sat a framed photo of my mother, smiling, warm, impossible. I'd never met her, only seen her in pictures, yet her presence clung to the room in a way that made the emptiness heavier. She died giving birth to me. Some nights I'd catch myself staring at it, wondering what she would have thought about my life now, about the choices I was making. My dad hadn't mentioned Ian once, not his name, not what happened. Just handed me a rag when I finally stepped out of my room, pointed at a greasy engine, and said, "Work." I did, because it was easier than talking. Dai. The days blurred. Wake up, work, eat in silence, repeat. Dad didn't look at me unless it was to hand me a tool. "Pass the socket wrench," he'd say. I'd pass it. "No, thank you. No conversation." I wanted to tell him everything I couldn't before. How I wasn't ashamed, how Ian wasn't some reckless fling, but the words stuck behind my teeth. So I stayed quiet, pretending grease under my nails could fill the hollow in my chest. It was a Friday when I heard the crunch of tires outside. I peeked through the window, expecting a customer. It wasn't. It was Ian. He got out, hair messy, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused like he'd been rehearsing this moment. Dad was already outside under his favorite project, the vintage blue van he'd been trying to fix for months, the same one he called his baby. "Morning, sir," Ian called, voice easy, confident. Dad's head jerked up. "You've got nerves showing up here." Ian smiled faintly. "Yeah, but your van's got worse, and I think I know what it needs." Dad scowled. "What?" Ian wiped his hands on a cloth he'd pulled from his pocket. A bit of TLC. An understanding. My breath caught. He looked straight toward my window, a smirk tugging at his lips like he knew I was watching. Dad grunted, eyes narrowing. "You think you can fix what I couldn't?" Ian shrugged. "Worth a shot. Worst case, I just get yelled at by a decorated veteran. Best case, you owe me coffee." Dad's glare didn't soften, but after a pause, he stepped aside. "Fine. Prove it." I watched Ian kneel by the van, confident, and I felt a flicker of hope. It was crazy, seeing him take on Dad like this. Dad who had built walls stronger than the barracks he'd spent decades in. I knew why Dad hated this idea so much. He'd lost friends in the service for being different, and he'd buried the shame of loving someone in the closet, thinking it was weakness. That memory made him unyielding, almost brutal in his judgment. Over the next few days, he kept coming back. Every morning, the same car is parked by the curb. Same stupid grin. One afternoon, Dad slammed a wrench on the Porsche workbench, muttering about men who couldn't handle a proper job, and stormed off into the house. Ian just shook his head and kept working, quiet, steady. That defiance, that patience, it was the only thing I'd ever seen crack Dad's armor even a little. "Your boy doesn't quit," Dad muttered once, watching Ian carry lumber across the yard. "He's not." I started, but stopped. My voice cracked halfway through. Ian worked like a man on a mission. Sometimes I caught him sneaking glances at me, like he was checking if I was okay. I never waved at Ian, but I watched him work. Fixing the fence, painting the porch, hauling lumber. Sweat streaked his face, his hands were raw, and he never complained. When I found out he'd been sleeping in his car, I felt something twist in my chest. That night, I walked outside quietly, hoodie pulled tight against the cold. His car windows were fogged. When I knocked, he blinked awake, smiling faintly. "Hey," he murmured. "What are you doing here, Ian?" My voice trembled. "Earning your dad's respect. You don't have to do this." He yawned, rubbing his neck. "Yeah, I do." "Why?" He looked at me then, eyes tired but steady. "Because he's the only wall between me and you, and I'm not losing you to a wall." I stared at him, speechless. I wanted to tell him to leave, but I couldn't. I just whispered, "You're insane." He grinned softly. "Yeah, but I'm yours, remember?" Before I could answer, the porch light flicked on. Dad's silhouette filled the doorway. "Inside," he barked. Ian straightened up. "Morning, sir." Dad glared. "You ever quit talking?" "Not when I've got an audience this grumpy." I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Dad's frown deepened, but he didn't throw him out. It was the first time I saw him hesitate, just pause, as if remembering he wasn't in the barracks anymore, as if realizing that not every challenge needed brute force. He just muttered, "Get the ladder from the shed if you're gonna be here." Ian's grin widened. "Yes, sir." I stood frozen, heart racing. That was the first time Dad didn't shut him down completely. By midweek, Dad let Ian stay past lunch. They worked side by side in the yard, mostly quiet except for the sound of tools. Every now and then, Dad would correct Ian's grip or grumble about torque pressure. Ian would nod like he was taking orders in boot camp. That afternoon, Ian offered to cook. He shouldn't have. The smell hit before the smoke did. The stew boiled over, the pot sizzling black, and the smoke alarm screamed to life. "Jesus!" Ian yelped, waving a towel. It's fine, kind of. It's just that this kitchen is new for me." Dad stormed in, coughing. "You're useless." Ian laughed, setting the burnt pot in the sink. "You sound like Aven when I mess up." Dad froze, caught off guard. For a second, just a flicker, something like amusement tugged at his mouth. "I can see why you two get along," he muttered. Ian smiled. "Guess stubborn runs in your house." Dad didn't reply. He turned to leave, but the tension in the air had shifted. Less ice, more cracks. I watched from the doorway, my heart tight and hopeful. Because for the first time in a week, I saw something I didn't think I'd ever see again. My dad listening to Ian instead of hating him. And maybe, just maybe, we weren't completely doomed. A day. Later, I had a dream. No, a nightmare, where Ian finally gave up on me, walked out, and never looked back. By the time I realized it was a nightmare, I woke up drenched in sweat, throat dry, and head burning. I thought I was hallucinating because Ian was there, kneeling by my bed like he never left. I blinked against the light sneaking through the curtains. My head felt stuffed with cotton, every sound muffled and far away. "Hey, easy," Ian said softly, pressing a cool towel to my forehead. His voice was that kind of warm that made my chest hurt. "Told you not to work your brain so much." I groaned, turning my face toward him. "You're still here?" He smirked. "Guess your dad didn't kill me yet." I tried sitting up, but my body wasn't having it. "Ian, Dad would be pissed if he saw you in my room." Ian clicked his tongue. "He's the one who let me in." That made me freeze. "What?" Ian leaned back in the chair beside the bed, brushing a damp strand of hair from my forehead. "You were shivering last night, calling my name like some tragic movie hero. Your dad heard. Figured I should be the one to handle you." My stomach twisted. "You're lying." "Wish I was," Ian murmured, looking toward the door. And there he was. Dad. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. My heart jumped into my throat. "Dad?" He didn't say anything, just gave a short nod before disappearing down the hall. For the first time, I realized the walls he built weren't unbreakable. They just needed the right patience, someone willing to stand there and not back down. Ian chuckled lowly. "He's mellowing out. Told you I'd win him over eventually." I wanted to laugh, I really did, but my throat burned too much, and the tears that suddenly welled up weren't from the fever. "You shouldn't have to fight this hard for us." Ian's hand lingered on mine. "Then don't make me fight alone." When I woke up again, the room was dim. The fever still clung to me, heavy and sticky. Ian was slumped over on the edge of the bed, dozing off, his fingers still wrapped around mine like he was afraid I'd vanish. The sound of the door creaking open made me close my eyes and pretend to sleep. Dad stepped inside, balancing a bowl of soup. He set it on the table quietly. eyes flicking toward Ian. You really love him, don't you? Dad said suddenly. Ian jerked awake. Yeah, always have. Dad didn't look surprised, just tired, like the fight in him had worn thin. He sat down on the edge of my desk chair, rubbing the back of his neck. You know, I was raised believing this was wrong, that loving another man meant something was broken in you. But watching you both, maybe some things are worth reconsidering. And if you're ready to stand against the world for your love, then maybe your love for each other is not wrong. Ian's voice softened. Yeah, I know. Dad's gaze moved to me, sweaty, pale, half-conscious, and then back to Ian. You think this makes you happy? Ian smiled a little, eyes tired but sure. Wrong things don't usually make people this happy, and you yourself had said, ours isn't wrong, isn't sir? The silence that followed felt different. Not angry, not heavy, just new. Dad exhaled. You're either brave or stupid. Probably both, Ian said with a grin. That made Dad snort under his breath, like he was trying not to smile. Get him to drink the soup once he is awake, then get some rest yourself. He left before I could say anything. Ian looked at the door for a long second, then turned to me. You can quit pretending to be asleep, soldier. Don't call me that. My voice cracked, weak but real. You think he is softening up? Maybe he just doesn't have the energy to argue, Ian smirked. But anyway, I'll take what I can get. He fed me a spoonful of soup, and I tried not to choke from the awkwardness. Ian, I said quietly. Yeah? Don't ever leave me. He brushed his thumb across my knuckles, a smile tugging at his mouth. Wasn't planning to. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't dream of losing him. A day later, when I woke up feeling well-rested and fever gone, the smell of burnt toast and cheap instant coffee hit me before I even reached the kitchen. For a second, I thought I was dreaming again. But nope. There they were. Dad was at the table, newspaper spread out, coffee mug steaming beside him. Ian sat across, hair messy, wearing one of Dad's flannel shirts that was definitely too big for him. They looked like two men who'd been doing this their whole lives. I froze at the doorway. You're an idiot for getting sick, Dad said without looking up. I blinked. Yeah, I know. He took a sip of his coffee. Lucky your boyfriend's more responsible and always there to protect you. My brain short-circuited. My what now? Ian choked on his drink, fighting a grin. Did you just say? Don't make me repeat it, Dad cut in sharply, flipping the page of his newspaper like he didn't just casually acknowledge my relationship. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then Ian leaned over to whisper, Did I just hear your dad call me your boyfriend? Shut up, I muttered, ears burning, but the corners of my mouth betrayed me. The air felt lighter. Awkward, sure, but something inside me unclenched. I grabbed a mug and poured myself coffee, trying not to stare too obviously. You still don't approve of men loving men, do you? I asked quietly. Dad's eyes lifted from the paper. No. He said it without hesitation, voice calm but honest. But maybe I don't have to. Ian's hand brushed mine under the table. Dad set his mug down, gaze softening. Love's still love. That's common between you both, and I'm no one to stand in the way of that if he is there to fight for you against the odds. My throat tightened. Dad! He got up before I could finish, patting my shoulder in his gruff, wordless way. You can resume your studies and be with your... He coughed into his fist, eyes darting toward Ian. Boyfriend. Then he grabbed his keys and muttered something about the van before walking out toward the garage. The silence he left behind was filled with the sound of Ian's laugh. I left out a shaky breath. I saw the man who had been ironclad in his beliefs, the one who'd buried, Grief, pride, and rigid lessons of service begin to bend ever so slightly. Not fully, not yet, but enough to hope. "So," Ian said after a moment, stretching in his chair with a satisfied grin. "Guess I passed inspection." I rolled my eyes, sipping my coffee to hide the smile tugging at my lips. "Barely." He leaned forward, smirking. "Barely's better than failing." "You talk too much." "Yeah, but you love that about me." He stood up, walked around the table, and pulled me in by the waist. My pulse jumped, but it wasn't nerves anymore. It was something calmer, grounded. "You know," he murmured, voice low, "I think your dad and I could start a support group. Men traumatized by Aven's stubbornness." I snorted. "You'd be the only member." He tilted his head, brushing his lips against mine. Slow, soft. The kind of kiss that didn't demand anything, just said, "I'm here." The sunlight streamed in through the window, painting his skin gold. I pressed my forehead to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against mine. "Guess this is peace, huh?" I whispered. Ian smiled against my hair. "Yeah, finally." Epilogue. 3 months later. Life had finally found a rhythm. Classes, coffee, long nights studying with Ian in our tiny apartment that smelled like takeout and engine grease. It all felt real now. The chaos had quieted. I was sprawled across the couch, laptop on my stomach, when my phone buzzed. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I sat up, heart skipping, like it still did every time. "Van's still running. Guess you two can too. Don't break each other." A small laugh slipped out. "He's consistent, I'll give him that." Ian glanced up from where he was fixing his old watch at the table. "What did he say this time?" I showed him the text. He snorted, shaking his head. "Man really loves that Van." "Or maybe he loves us," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Ian looked at me for a long moment, eyes warm. "Told you I'd win him over." I grinned, pushing the laptop aside. "Yeah, you did." He tugged me closer until I was half sitting in his lap, our faces inches apart. "You know," he murmured, brushing a thumb along my jaw, "for a guy who used to hate me, your dad sure calls a lot." "He's learning," I said, smiling. "Guess we all are?" Ian's hand settled against my chest, over my heartbeat. "You okay?" "Yeah," I breathed. "For the first time, I think I really am." Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the walls gold. I leaned into Ian, resting my head on his shoulder, the phone still glowing faintly in my hand. Dad's message, a quiet truce, a promise. The van was still running. So were we. And this time, nothing felt like it might break. The end ever had your partner try to win over your scary parent and actually pull it off? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to become part of our Rainbow Force, and consider joining our membership for early access and exclusive content. Stay wholesome.